Whatquanawadu sewa guego gusto saraguate ni yongyatstanu. Today we visit with Miccosukee elder Auntie Betty Osceola of the Panther Clan. She's been in the news a lot lately for spiritually and legally battling Alligator Alcatraz. That's the extremely troubling detention center hastily built last summer in the Florida Everglades, and that's the home of her nation. But Betty's been at this protection work her whole life, and we talked to her about what prayer and teachings mean to her, especially in this time of extreme chaos, and the status of that detention center, and the stunning life-giving power of the Everglades. We are Yetini Staha Nedegarunya Ganore, the anti-dandelion, a great Nyawagoa to Indigenous Screen Office for their ongoing support so we can share important stories from awesome aunties like Betty. And don't forget, go ahead and listen to your aunties. Betty, welcome to the Anti-Dandelion. We're so happy to have you here today. Could you introduce yourself in language and just let us know where you are today? I know you said your office is your car.
Yes.
Your car, yeah.
Well, my name is Betty Osceola. Miccosukee ayamolete ilaposni chate yatate man amochefke yetkowe mahen amochalet shanabonte so nichit importon lete and himenes tawaye kahe the name let amashekena hoksam le ma man tagaki pulet hanten takene imligaye man choli chumlete pinapat yatagan lisian man ayamlewa himetoa. So my name is Betty Osceola. I'm a member of the Miccosukee tribe of Indians. We call ourselves the Ilaposnichali people, and I'm of the Panther Clan. And I'm a grandmother with a lot of grandchildren. And in our culture, we don't name our grandparents by the childhood name they were given. We're called the grandmothers of, or the grandparents of. What people know me as, my family knows me as, is the grandmother of Nichi. That's my daughter's oldest child. And I'm in the Florida Everglades at my place of business. And today my vehicle is my office, but I'm sitting here today at my place of business where I do eco tours about the environment on the Miccosukee Indian Reservation.
Amazing. And when your business is, you're an airboat pilot, is that how you describe, or captain? Is that how you describe that?
Yes, I do pilot airboats, as does my staff. And we actually, the business where I'm at, Buffalo Tiger Airboat Tours, was actually started by our Mr. William Buffalo Tiger, who happened to be the very first elected chairman of our tribe, and took tourists out to his family's historic island where he grew up as a child. And we run that operations today. A couple years before he passed on, my late husband, was his nephew. So we approached him about taking over the operations because we didn't want to see it just, stop being in existence. Because unfortunately and sadly, none of his children were in a position to take over because they had their own personal pursuits, and which he advocated for them to do whatever it is that they wanted to do. So we took over the operations, and the one thing he asked of us to do is that continue what he started, continue his legacy, and to keep the company and his name so they wouldn't forget about him and his legacy. So we've been doing that for 16 years now.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
So, and just tell us about the land that you're on. I've been looking at all kinds of research about the Everglades and that the darkest skies are there and just kind of the glory and, wonder of the Everglades.
The Everglades itself is this, beautiful landscape, like a subtropical landscape in the middle of Florida with a lot of trees, a lot of islands, even though we've lost some of our tree islands, and we're surrounded by water. Our tribe's land base is surrounded by, we have more water than we do dry land. And if you were to go out into the Everglades itself, you'll see, open water with sawgrass and cattails. And if you're gliding around out there or on an airboat or kayaking, you'll see great blue herons. This time of year, we start getting in, more of the wading birds, the wood storks, the egrets, the alligators. And it's just a really beautiful open area. And some of the areas when you go through, you'll start seeing more cypress trees when you get more upland. And it's just really that flora and fauna. When you go in, when I'm out there, I think, wow, this is what creation is about. I don't see another human being out here. It's just me and nature. And I'm always, in awe, no matter how many years I've lived here. I'm 58 years old. So I'm always impressed about, creator, we say breath maker, that creation that breath maker put here. And so when you come out here, it's not a wasteland. It's abundant with life. It's a living, breathing entity. And I just feel when I go out there, I just feel, you know, so peaceful. Just to feel the wind, not to hear a car go by, just like, it really grounds you and for me, what is life is about. Sometimes people hear, oh, there's alligators and it's something to be afraid of. Oh, there's panthers out there. There's bears out there. You got to be afraid. But it's not something to be afraid of. It's something to be respected. It's something to be valued for what it is because it provides a home. And this is a place where my ancestors, when they were being chased by the cavalry. And there was that movement to send us on the Trail of Tears and ship us out west. My family, our ancestors hid in the Everglades and they resisted that forced relocation. And because we resisted and we hid in the Everglades, it protected us. It provided us a home. It provided us, that food and shelter.
Why do you think people call it a wasteland when it's so abundant? I mean, it's so obviously abundant. Why do you think people give it that designation?
Because they can't make money off of it. Unfortunately, in today's society, this capitalistic society, nothing has value unless you can make money off of it. And the fact that this resource that provides, our here, the Everglades provides fresh water for over 8 million people. And also the value is water itself. A lot of people understand that trees help, clean the air and, for you to have that oxygen to breathe. But what they don't understand is that water is the biggest resource that we have on the planet for our oxygen. And, it's amazing how people don't understand the value of that, because if you take away your oxygen and your ability to have that oxygen, that fresh air to breathe, then what difference is it if you have a lot of money? The Florida Everglades itself is the actual filtering system for the fresh water that 8 million people rely on. And also, as water flows through the Everglades, you have the surface water where the water is flowing. It actually trickles down into the aquifer, and it's an aquifer recharge source. And if the Everglades were to ever die off, then there's not going to be any ability for that surface water to trickle down into that aquifer that basically is one of the largest aquifers in the United States. And then that aquifer, instead of having fresh water, you're going to have that saltwater intrusion into that drinking water source. And that's how important the Everglades is in this entire ecosystem. And it's a lot of educating we have to do, and people don't understand the value of the Everglades because there's a lot of development pressures all the time. Whether it's from in Florida, we have Miami-Dade County to our east, and a little bit north, we have to our northeast, we have Broward County, Florida, and then we have West Palm Beach, and then we have the area of Lake Okeechobee. We have all these development pressures that keep reducing the area where there's ability to have fresh water flow. And as it's flowing, it's also nourishing the environment itself, and it's also keeping that salt water at bay, flowing through the surface all the way down towards the Keys and Florida Bay. At the same time, it's keeping that pressure, that underground pressure of fresh water that holds that saltwater intrusion out. So, yeah, so over time, because the Everglades is about half the size that it historically was, so, and we have all this development and not free flowing water, we're seeing more now as time goes on, we're seeing more saltwater intrusion into Miami-Dade County for their freshwater drinking wells on the West Coast. Even our own tribe, some of our tribal members live more towards the West Coast, and they've started to see And those villages, because we still live in villages today, some of us, like myself, their other tribal members are starting to see saltwater encroachment into their freshwater drinking wells in their villages. So our tribe is having to put in, uh, um, they have to think of how are they going to provide fresh water to those camps. And, we're even having in our future having to think about, are we going to have desalinization plants too, as well? So that, that's down the road, the conversations that we're already having.
How big is the Miccosukee tribe?
Well, in our membership, enrolled members, because it's not automatic enrollment. You have to seek that enrollment. So we're a little over 600 people who are enrolled, but we have a few hundred that choose not to enroll for whatever reason. And a lot of times in our culture, families really don't enroll their kids until they're about 4 years old, and some even leave it up to their children to seek that enrollment when they become adults.
And so you have villages that are in and among the Everglades, right?
Yes, we have. Our tribe has, when the patterns of water flow were altered and you couldn't freely just canoe across the Everglades anymore, and also the climate was changing where it was getting harder to find game and to travel. A lot of the families, after the Tamiami Trail was constructed to connect Tampa to Miami, Florida, a lot of individuals relocated the Indian villages they had on the islands to next to the highway. And I actually live in one of the Indian villages where I grew up still. And but we do have a community area where the tribe, during that period of time and seeking that federal recognition and then establishing, it's interesting how you have your territorial lands, but then you have to prove it, and then you have to apply for it and get Congress to say, oh, yeah, these are your lands, right? Even though you knew they were your lands all along. So they, have the federal reservation and a strip of land where the tribe put in effort for people to relocate to and to build homes. It's about 4 miles long, and it's just a narrow strip of land. But some of us, our families had made their Indian villages off the reservation area, and so some of us still live in those off the reservation. But my house is about 5 miles from the main reservation, and there's maybe about 19 villages where some of our community still chooses to live in our traditional form of housing, like uh, we say chiget for home. And those traditional houses were built out of cypress trees and palmetto leaves for the thatching for the roof. And back in the earlier days, they were open air, no walls. Today, like my house, it has the thatched roof. It was one of my brothers built it, and but it has walls and electricity. So we've kind of modernized that chiki. But there's just a handful of us that still hold on to that. A lot of our tribal members live in the regular American style CBS homes, but they might have a chicky hut in their backyard for a cooking area, an eating area, but their main house is that CBS home.
And how recently did you all get federal recognition?
Our tribe was recognized in 1962, and the United States government didn't even want to recognize us because they had recognized the Seminole tribe of Florida first. And in the federal government's mind, every Indian, regardless of what their tribe that they came from, the United States was like, if you live in Florida, you're Seminole. We don't care. That's what we're saying you are. So our tribe fought a long time to get that recognition, and they had good friends at the time. They had some attorneys who did pro bono work, and they had a professor, Dr. Kersey was his name, who I believe he was at University of Florida, that helped put everything down and document it to put that application forth. But even still, the United States government didn't want to listen. So a handful of our tribal elders with the attorneys um, got on the airplane and went to Cuba. And they had a meeting with Castro. And Castro had told them, well, if the United States doesn't want you, I do. I'll give you a place to live. And he actually gave international recognition to the Miccosukee people before the United States ever did. And this was in the late 1960s. This is during the Cuban Missile Crisis, the fear of communism, and all that. Spain had interceded on our behalf as well, was calling Washington as some other countries did. And then once Washington heard that these, renegade Indians were in Cuba with Castro, they opened that conversation and told the tribal elders at the time, come back to America. We'll give you your recognition on one condition: you never go back to Cuba.
Oh my God. Yeah, I bet. Oh my
So that's
God.
how so our tribe played a good hand of poker.
Yeah. How
Yeah,
did that
so,
relationship with Castro begin in the first place? Just reaching out? Just,
reaching out and also reaching out to Spain because in our history, when Spain at some point supposedly owned Florida and the United States wanted to acquire Florida, from what I was taught, is that Spain had told the United States that they need to honor those agreements that by that time they were on better terms with the tribes here in Florida. And Spain had told the United States to honor those agreements they had with the indigenous people. And if they didn't, then Spain could reconsider taking Florida back.
yeah.
So, and our tribal elders knew that. We understood that. So that's why they had reached out to Spain and that the United States isn't honoring their agreement. They had reached out to Cuba because somehow the attorneys at the time had gotten word that Castro was sympathetic to the indigenous people. But we knew Castro had an ulterior motive. We knew that. Yeah, Castro wanted something and we wanted something. So that's how they got on the airplane. And it's interesting how it's a small world. At one point in the time, the United States had an attorney general by the name of Janet Reno.
Yeah.
The Reno family, one of her brothers actually went to Cuba on that infamous trip.
No kidding.
Yeah, so I thought that was because they lived here in Miami, in the Coral Gables area. So the tribe had a heavy presence of being because before Miami is like it is today, what beaches and hotels, we still had in the earlier infancy of Miami, there was a lot of Indian villages in Miami itself. So over time, the tribal people made friendships and relationships with people in Miami, and they were able to leverage those friendships to be able to get to where we are today. That coalition building.
Yeah. Yep. Which you're still doing, obviously.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and as somebody who is your Panther Clan, right? And
Yes.
it seems like everybody knows about a Florida Panther. Do you carry really specific responsibilities related to your clan?
Yeah, each of our clans do because we have a bird clan, we have a wind clan, we have an otter clan, there's snake clan, there's bear clan, there's Double clan, Big Town clan. And so each clan has their specific responsibilities. Like bird clans are good at speaking, like public speaking.
Hmm.
The Wind clan is more like healers, and they're very they don't like conflict. And Otter clan, they're very artsy. They're very pacifying people, but they have their place as well when it comes to that kinship of how, because when we have our ceremonies, each clan has their responsibility in that ceremony. So it's kind of like that. In Panther Clan, we were historically the warriors of our people, but also the healers, the medicine people, uh, as well. And even in our ceremonies, Panther Clan are the medicine people, the that takes care of the medicine bundle and stuff, along with the Wind clan. Those two clans. No other clan has that responsibility. So it is a heavy responsibility. And I was always raised that as being a Panther clan, we have to look out for all the clans, the entire tribe.
Yeah. And are you matrilineal?
Our clan is passed down through the mother, and it's the mother's clan's family to provide the bulk of the traditional knowledge. You have the father and his family, but the main responsibility is with the mother and her family.
Hmm. And you've really been in, I mean, you've been at the forefront of it forever, right? Like the environmental challenges and fights and framing and praying for a long time. And what I come across a lot is your belief in prayer and calling what you do not a protest, but leading prayer walks. And how does that intersect and how does that interrupt what is going on and this constant onslaught?
My mentor was my late mother and her late brother, and he was, a spiritual leader. And that's how, with the prayer walks, I mentored under him, and that's what he did. And because, when our healers of our community are very connected in prayer and healing and connecting with our Creator. And that's how I was taught, is that everything we do is how Creator wants it to happen and how it needs to happen with under Creator's guidance. So when I pray, um, I have a conversation with Creator, Pajakiomache. And when there's things happening, when I pray, I ask, what do you need me to do? I ask the earth, what do you need me to do? And how do I need, what does, this need to look like? It's not what Betty wants it to look like, but it's how creation is asking for it to occur. And and sometimes I'll get like a feeling or an intuition, something comes to me that, okay, it's time. When the earth calls, you need to get up and pray. You need to remind your people that they need to take care of the earth. You need to remind humanity that I need help here. Sometimes it's a like with water, because I have a connection with water, and I'll hear the water saying, I need to pray, even if I'm alone. And sometimes the water is like, you haven't come and spoke to me for a long time, you haven't seen me for a long time, you need to get in the water. and and I'll visit places and I'll hear from the water, you need to make them understand, they're hurting me, I need help, I need your help to stop this. So and I think and that's I'm fortunate that my mom and my uncle taught me how to connect and to be open, because when you're connected and nature sees you and nature knows you see nature, then it'll start communicating with you. And it knows that, oh, I've asked that person for help before, so I can ask them for help again.
Yeah.
And a prayer walk, it takes a lot. It takes a lot on the person at the head of that walk, because you're carrying the weight of everybody behind you, and and keeping them that strength. And it's very physically and spiritually exhausting. People don't really understand what it takes for an individual that is at the head of a walk, or even if they're not walking. And I used to see my uncle do it, is having to care for that line. He prayed about it, he did his medicine, he did the cleansing, and then even after the fact of closing out of that ceremony of prayer, having to do that medicine, that was a lot on him.
Yeah.
And and I didn't realize how much, even though I mentored and walked with him, and it was hard on me physically, but the fact that being that next person to carry and organize, and I'm like, wow, what is it? You understand where that person's coming from after you walk a mile in their shoes? A mile in his shoes is very heavy. And so, when we do a prayer walk, you know, and when I look at when it should occur, I'll look at a calendar, a year calendar, and I actually see like numbers come off the page. I'm like, okay, that's when it needs to start. And when I pray about it, the duration also, it'll show me those numbers. If it's a 5 day, 2 day, 7 day, however long it needs to be, it'll just like kind of like the numbers just lift off the page. And I'm like, okay, then now even myself, sometimes I don't always know. I'm like, okay, I'll ask, why does it need to be during this time? Why this specific time and not another date? But only Creator knows that, for whatever reason. And I'll create the event, and whoever shows up shows up. And sometimes you have 30 to 60, 100 people show up, or 60 people a day. Sometimes I did a walk where I only had 7 people, and people were like, "Oh, why don't we have more?" But then we were like walking at the edge of a tornado one day, one day, and all the rain, it rained on consistently for 3 days. I'm like, okay, this is why we're such a small group, because we had to share tents and we had to huddle around the fire. Imagine doing that with 60 people
Yeah.
and walking through the edge of a tornado and, survive. And not even sleeping all night. Imagine having to worry about hypothermia for 60 people versus like 7 people.
Yeah.
It's much. I said, this is what, and like, this is why Creator only sent 7 people, because we can care for 7 people and get through it together as 7 people. And so I've learned to turn, I gave myself over to Creator a long time ago to be uh, that tool, because that's all we are, is a tool. When we pray, we're just that vessel that, healing comes through. We're not the one who does the actual healing. That's how I see it. That's how I was taught. We're just that, if Creator says, "Hey, I need, my daughter, my son, my grandchild, I need your help." And, can you do, I need you to do this to me. You get up and do it. Because to me, um, because I've been doing it for so long, it's like it's hard for people to not, it's hard for other people. They think they organize and they do this and they do that. But when you're coming from a spiritual place, you're just the one, facilitating how it needs to be done. So when we do a prayer walk, we're praying over the landscape. We're praying for the plants and the animals, and we're praying for the human beings. And because we walk in silence, we're not talking to each other. My uncle instituted that rule, and I keep that rule, because when I first started helping him, the first walk I did, the first mile, all he heard was people talking about work and talking about their problems and talking about this, and ignoring the very thing that they showed up to pray for. They were focused on themselves. And then he said, "You know what? You're going to tell them they can't talk to each other. That's going to force them with their eyes to look at nature, to hear nature, and it's going to force them to consciously think and prayer, whether that's a singing prayer, whether that's they're in a meditative state and in their prayer, and it's going to force them to actually connect and focus in that prayer." And he gave them assignments, you know, like what at the end he would always ask, "What did you hear? What did you see?" And then based on their answers, he could tell that they weren't in prayer,
Mm.
because yeah, they weren't trying to connect. And those multi-day prayers, by the end of the last few days, you could tell they went from thinking of all these random thoughts to then to actively being in prayer and observing nature. The people that you have at the day one aren't the same at day 7. And when you're walking 20 miles a day and you're in the hot sun and you're in those elements, it kind of like strips those layers from you, and then it really brings you into um, the moment.
How long do those walks last?
It depends. It's we've done 2-day prayer walks because that's what it called for. We've done 7-day prayer walks. We've done 5-day prayer walks. We've done usually the 5 days have been like over 100 miles, the 7 days up to 120 miles over that time period, because it really, when you think about it, when you're physically exhausted, when you're physically and mentally exhausted, you've kind of like that onion, you've peeled off all those layers to get to the heart. You're at a place where you're connecting on a different level, versus if you just come and join for a mile or two. When you've done that entire prayer walk and you've got the blisters on your feet, you've you learned how to function as a group. You're more connected with each other as individuals, and um, keeping that prayer line going. It's like a ley line. It's like an energy line. So focusing, and that's what we've put forth too, is that you have to focus that energy. because if you're strong in your focus and your prayer and your positive thought, the person that is the flag bearer, the person all the way up front, you're like recharging that person. But when your mind wanders and you're feeling sad and you have angry thoughts, that person at that front of that line starts to feel angry. They start to feel exhausted. They start to drag, and then that staff starts getting very heavy. So it's and being the facilitator of because in my culture a female can't be the flag bearer. You have to have a man. But if you don't have a flag bearer, then yeah, you can be at the front of that line. But if you're having a flag bearer, it has to be a man, and it has to be a native man, whether it's your tribe or of another tribe. And because they're carrying and it has to be who you choose has to be one that has that heart to do it, because they have to walk the entire walk. They don't have the luxury to say, oh yeah, I'm tapping out. They're there from start to finish, and so it's it can be very intense.
Yeah, amazing. Well, and it does sound like that prayer walk is about building that relationship back, and these distractions that keep us from that relationship with the earth. And there's also been like this disservice of like energy, like Western types of energy
Yes.
work that are, it's just so individual, and it's not about being grateful to the plants so that we can be in communication with them. And so it all gets lumped under like, oh, kumbaya, or, like whatever. But it's so very different. And what you're describing sounds like to me is just really reigniting that actual relationship so you can actually be in practical and spiritual discussion, right, with the plants and the land.
Yeah, it helps reconnect people. And also during the breaks, if I see someone struggling and need healing, I'll actually go through an exercise where I'll just lay on the ground, I'll take my shoes off and everything, just lay on the ground and connect. And I'll tell them, I said, whoever wants to join me, and I'll walk them through it. And then just have them grounding themselves with the earth
Hmm.
and absorbing and letting that, whatever it is they're feeling, whether it's their aches and pain or sad thoughts, or just they're just really like low in energy, using the earth to recharge you. And they can actually, and afterwards they're like, we actually felt like some kind of electrical current coming along, and just like we're so energized now, and showing those things that you can look to nature to get that healing, but also walking them through to thank nature for doing that to them. And even as we're walking, acknowledge the air, acknowledge the birds, acknowledge the trees. Even if you tell the trees, you look beautiful today, or I thank you for cleaning the air, or telling the water, I thank you for helping us, give us this life through the water that we can drink, and taking care of us, acknowledging the earth, letting the earth know that you're there for it.
I'm feeling
My
that
my
energy even
Yeah.
right now, Betty. Like I'm just like,
Yeah. Yeah, my I have an adopted nephew, he's Lakota, and the very first time he walked with me, he goes, Auntie, how come you didn't tell me this is like a walking hamblecha, a walking ceremony? And it is, it's a walking ceremony. And he didn't realize, he if I had said it's like a hamblecha, he would have knew how it is for me, because I guess because I've been doing it for so long. I'm like, I'm going on a prayer walk, so people think I stroll around the park. They don't realize that we're walking in ceremony.
wow. Yeah, because I teach an Indigenous environmental justice class, and to mainly non-Indigenous students, and they are so open to this idea of relationship with the earth, and then interrupted with like, this isn't real. And it's like trying to find these ways to actually connect people in, because I'm such a practical person. I'm like, this is so practical, and so it's like a one-on-one conversation with the earth that you're meant to have, right, to
Yes.
get your
Yeah.
wisdom. That's where the wisdom lives. Like, it feeds us, it tells us how to live, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like if you want to understand a tree, go hug a tree.
Go seriously,
Go,
like truly.
and, you know, go hug that tree and talk to it, and you'll understand, that tree.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, you've been in the news quite a bit lately, and you, in your beautiful environment, you came across this detention camp that was being built. Can you? I almost hate to like interrupt this beautiful thing with this other thing, but it's really the power of what you've been doing, carrying over to affect this. Really doing the job that needs to be done, right? So, can you talk about how you discovered that this detention camp was being built? It was on an airstrip that you all stopped at one point, right? From being built, it
Yes.
was going to. Yeah. Can you tell us about that?
Yes. When I first learned of the intention to build this detention facility, it was on a Thursday, and a commercial had come out about it that someone had saw, and they sent it to me and like, have you seen this? And I clicked it and I watched it, and I'm like, I thought it was a joke. And I watched it again. I'm like, okay, this isn't a joke. And they taught, and it was very upsetting because of how they described my home, the Everglades, like it was this wasteland teeming with alligators and snakes, and made it seem like, why would anyone but want to be here? It's this god awful place out in the middle of nowhere. And then how there's nobody out here. I'm like, hey, wait a minute, I'm out here. My relatives are the, my tribe is out here. What do you mean? Then I'm like, okay, so in 2025, we're still considered nobody. And and so I called my tribe. I'm like, hey, do you know about this? Did you see this? And like, yeah, we heard about it, and we made phone calls, and we're calling Tallahassee and calling our lobbyists, calling people we know, and they all say it's a joke. It's just to garner votes. Don't worry about it. I'm like, I don't know. My gut is telling me I need to worry about this, and I'm going to do something. And they didn't think, like it was a wasted effort. And I said, look, I said, you can think of it as a joke, but I'm going to get up and do something. And if I'm wrong, great. Then I just let the state know, hey, we're watching you. We're not going to put up with this. And so I started making phone calls to individuals I knew who just came off the state of Florida's the parks to fight to protect their state parks, because at one point the state was trying to put pickleball courts and everything else in state parks. So I knew people who were a part of that fight, and I said, hey, can you help me rally the troops? This is what I want to do. And, receiving the news on a Thursday, I'm like, okay, something tells me we got to do this right away, and it has to be on Sunday. And so we put out the call. And lo and behold, when we were out there on Sunday, I think we got about 600 people. We start out on Sunday. While we were there, we started seeing the vehicles roll in to start working on this place. So it wasn't a joke. And then on Monday, the tribe is like, Miss Betty, you're right. It wasn't a joke. And I said, well, great. Now that we can start working on this, since we all know this isn't a joke, and how we're going to stop this. And a lot of people don't understand the reason we have the Big Cypress National Preserve. It evolved out of the fight in the late 1960s, early 1970s to stop the original construction of the world's largest commercial airport at the time. And that's why they were actually building it. And a wide coalition of people got together and formally organized, the indigenous people, the hunters, the fishermen, the bird watchers, the scientists, members of the public that loved this place, all came together, found common ground to fight this, and they were able to stop it. That's why we have that one runway. And then out of that, the Big Cypress National Preserve was created because President Nixon at the time, he signed off to not have any federal money involved in this, and that was instrumental. And this was under a Republican administration. You got to remember that. And out of that
Nixon was
fight,
surprising. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
yes, yeah. So out of that fight, the very first environmental study at the time happened because of this fight. You didn't have that, wasn't the norm. And then you have, the laws for NEPA and the guidelines and the EPA, the creation of the EPA, because you had other things going on in the United States, and it just culminated to where we ended up with the Clean Water Act. And so right now, environmental laws are on trial. The very place that helped, the creation of these things is on trial. And here we are again. I never thought that I would be in a fight at the jet port like my mother and the elders were with everyone else. But here we are again, the same organization, Friends of the Everglades. They were created by Marjorie Stoneman Douglas and other people to fight the jet port and the Miccosukee tribe. And here we are again, many years later, together in the same lawsuit, trying to stop something at that very same location.
It got built super fast, correct?
8 days, 8 days. The state of Florida can't even respond to a hurricane aftermath in 8 days.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're claiming that it's a state of emergency and they just somehow amazingly had everything organized and built in 8 days tells you they were at this much longer. And in reading the newspaper reports and on the news, uncovering that they had visited the location in January of this year,
Oh, really?
and or maybe even earlier, because they're still trying to get documents because they've made document requests and everything. And recently, Friends of the Everglades sued because all the documents that they had requested they're not getting anything. So now they're suing over it to get the court to force them to turn over any emails, any memorandums, any telephone records, all that kind of stuff, because there is no way from Thursday that's miraculously all these semis got loaded up with all this material and these contracts are signed, because that's a lot of legwork. It's because the government works at a very slow pace. So that all of that did not happen in those 8 days.
No. And then they just started bringing people in so quickly as well. It wasn't
Yeah,
just
they did.
building, right? Was it like 3,000 people?
They were up to over 1,500 people with the capacity to house 3,000. And if there was conversation that if the federal government needed it, that they could expand to accommodate 10,000 people.
And those are just, they call it like soft buildings, or is that just like tents? They're not even, and
They're
kind of
tents.
mobile air conditioning and.
Well, they have tents. Just think of, you do a major outdoor event and you have this big tent erected with the canvas top and canvas walls. And they brought in these big portable AC units that you'll see at big events if they put AC in, and they're run by generators. That's how it is. And then basically dog cages that can house up to 32 people. And there have been reports that when in the initial when they were up to about 1,500 people, that those toilets that they hastily put in these cells were overflowing, so you had feces in the floor, so they were walking around in feces. They weren't being there were reports of the food had bugs in it. If you and there was a lot of mosquitoes. Lights are on 24 hours a day. And also, if you made any kind of complaint, or if you phones were installed that you could call out, and we can tell those recordings came out because, like in a jail, if somebody calls you, it tells you the facility name, right? So, we had where families showed up by the highway looking for, they thought, like any facility that you go to, whether it's a jail or prison, you can come up to a building, there's a guardhouse, there's a way to check in, talk to somebody. None of that exists out here. But they were showing up, and sometimes they had, their family calling them while they were standing beside the road, and you can hear it's telling where they're at and that the call is recorded. And then, these are Spanish speakers, so their family, you would translate, they're saying the food is bad. If anybody says because they can hear the phone calls, if anybody tries to tell their family member what the actual conditions are, they get punished. They get put in a small box out in the Florida sun, and the temperatures were getting over like 90 degrees or more with the humidity. So they were being punished. So they were like trying to censor what people were saying. There were some reports that people have died in there, but the state denies it. But people calling out or saying that they have seen people die. So, that's still a mystery that they're trying to solve as well. How many people have actually died from being there?
And now there are two major lawsuits coming out of this. And honestly, the news is so bad. I thought, like, my partner asked me today, like, what is the status of that? I'm like, oh, they've shut it down, and they have not, come to find out, right? It's just so hard
Yeah.
to get information.
What's hard about, you want to get wins, but a lot of times when you get a temporary win, everybody thinks, oh, it's done, let's move on.
Yep.
Yeah, let's move on. So they got a temporary stay where the facility had to not accept more people and had to reduce their population and start tearing things down. And then the state of Florida appealed, and the appellate court did grant that appeal. So they were able to start ramping up operations again. So that's where we're at. And the tribe and Friends of the Everglades and Center for Biological Diversity, because we're together in this lawsuit, has filed an appeal, but that won't be heard until January of next year. So, it, since they have really constructed a lot of what they have planned to do, the traffic that you see today is them busing people in, buses going in, water trucks going in, because there is no infrastructure for all of that, permanent infrastructures. So they have to truck in water every day. They have portable toilets, the facility. So they have those trucks going in every day to take out the waste. And so you have that. And you have the people being employed there to guard the people, to provide medical services, going in and out. Supposedly from this facility, 800 people are unaccounted for. They have left they have left this facility and nobody knows where they have gone to. That's the other part about it too, is that it's like a black hole. You go in there and you disappear. And they're all constantly getting new numbers. It's not whatever number they're assigned doesn't travel with them everywhere, and it doesn't make it into the ICE database. Like any other ICE facilities, you can type in the person's name and it'll show that they're in a facility. For this facility, there's no way to get that information. And when they get transferred somewhere else, the only way their family members know where they're at is if they make a phone call and say, I'm in Texas, or I'm in Arizona, I'm in Louisiana. That's the only way family members can find out where their loved ones are.
Yeah. Well, so on a day-to-day basis, are you there at the gate every day, or what are your activities now? Because it seems like you do so much. You've got so much going
Yeah, but
on.
in the initial, I was there every day. I arranged it where, my kids were helping run the business, but they have their own business too, so that was hard on them. And they were running the day-to-day operations. And so I was out there getting a lot of footage with a couple of other people, just trying to have that proof for the lawsuits of what was coming in and out, counting vehicles that we could get track of, so that we were telling the attorneys, so that they had that information for court. Now, it has slowed down. We haven't seen much people. I do go there, but I'm not there all day. I'm not there 24/7 because I have a business to run. And so, I do go over there, but I'm not there hours and hours at a time.
Yeah.
And then there's still a couple other individuals that, will say, hey, I don't have to work today, so if you want me to, I'll go post up and let you know. And then, and we do that. So we're having to do spot checks because we don't have anyone paid to be out there. This is all, concerned people that are out there and try to monitor online. We have people that have been tracking the flights.
Hmm. Where did they fly into? Did they fly in right there because there's an airfield?
Yes, they yeah, under the FAA, it's called TNT. So if you have FlightWare or Flight Radar or whatever, if you type in TNT, it'll actually pop up and show you that field. But online, it's with the FAA, it's called TNT.
And do people go in there to try to keep an eye on the facility itself? Like, how close
You
can you
can't.
get?
You can't.
Yeah.
You can't. Right at the entrance roadway, there's state troopers. So unless you have business there or work there, you're not getting in. Because reporters have tried. Because they'll act like they have business there and they'll just drive past the state troopers, but then you have the National Guard that will stop you and you got to show your paperwork, your documentation, and everything, and then they get turned around. So there's unless you're invited press, you can't get back there. It's even hard for state legislators to get back there.
Yeah, they got turned away, right? The Democrats
Yes.
that went down there. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're looking at these lawsuits, more coming in January, and you just have to keep that pressure on, right?
Yes.
And gather and
Yes.
basically act as a paralegal or, right? Information gatherer for these lawsuits. Um, and so putting this in, it's like protecting ancestral lands and affirming human rights. That's all the same thing, right?
Yes, it is.
Wouldn't you say? And the way that people are being treated, when you think about the way that people treat land, I guess it makes sense that they're treating individuals this way.
Yeah, because and it's not surprising because I always say, how can you respect people to treat each other as human beings when we can't even respect the environment? Because that's where it starts, right? Because you have to have that mutual respect of all life and understand. And that's why I feel like I'm so fortunate to have grown up the way I did and at a young age being taught that we have to be mindful. Like, if you're going to harvest the plants, you have to first have that conversation with the plant and tell them why you need to harvest their leaves or their roots or even to eat. If you're going to pick some fruit off a tree, you have to ask permission from that tree. Let them know you're picking that fruit to feed yourself and your family. Or if you're going to harvest a fish, you thank that fish for giving its life for your sustenance. All of that is interconnected and woven. So if you can't respect all of that, it's not surprising that there's this lack of respect for, the your fellow human beings.
Yeah. Yeah. And so from this perspective, we can start wrapping up as well. What would you say? This is more for my class, but also will benefit, people who are listening for the Auntie's Dandelion. Environmental justice from an indigenous perspective. How would you define that? How do you wrap that up? I think it's everything that we've been talking about, but can you put that into one concept or one definition?
Well, for me, environmental justice is that you have to be that voice for the voiceless. You have to be mindful that this is the earth. This is the place that we was created for us to exist. We're just a being on, just like the plants and the water, the other animals. We're what make up that ecosystem. So in order for the earth to survive, we have to help protect it to survive. We have to defend it because a tree can't get up and show up to the voting ballot and vote, right? You know, and so someone has to be that voice. Someone has to remind people that there's a way of doing things in a good way. And for me, that's how I was raised, that we have to be those defenders of the earth, and we have to make sure the earth is treated in a good way. And that's up for us to do. Because otherwise, if you don't, the earth is going to wipe you off the face of the earth.
That's right. Right. That's right. And and in that context of all this work that you have done and you've been so dedicated to, what are the things that are just bringing you life? What are you enjoying the most these days? What are you doing to protect your energy? And where does Betty just love her life? Well, here's my little panther. Come here.
Yeah, so the cat is reminding you right here, right here. For me, it's I recharge myself in nature. to walk off in nature, whether it's to hike into it. Since I do pilot a boat, it's, I really enjoy just taking the boat out and you're just, driving away from people and just going to an island and just sitting there and just really, absorbing everything around me. And also
Yeah.
too, when I look at the animals and every day, when I start feeling frustrated or like, this is getting exhausting, then something like, I call it like those little small, glimpses of, like not miracles, but those signs, something will
Yeah.
happen. And, sometimes it's a matter of just seeing, cause we have ducks out here. Sometimes I'll see a mama duck and her baby and they're babies and they're just swimming around. And I'm like, okay, this is why I do it. So this mama can raise her babies out here.
Yeah.
And I have a great affinity for alligators because I'm around them all the time. And I'll see a
Mm.
mama gator with her little baby alligators swimming around. And I'm like, this is why I do it, so they can have a home. And then, I have grandchildren. Every time when I'm with their grandchildren and I'm watching them play and run around and just having so much fun and just being those children, I'm like, okay, this is why I do it. Yeah, I
Yeah.
might get tired, but this is why I do it. So our children, our youth of tomorrow can have a tomorrow. Little things like that,
Yeah.
brings me joy and the reminder of why. And it's always interesting how when I'm at that moment, I'm like, man, I'm getting tired. I wish somebody else would pick up this torch, and I see these
Mm.
reminders. I'm like, okay, I got to keep going. And in whatever capacity I can, and then give time for those other generations to get to a point to pick up that torch. I think that's why my uncle started mentoring me, is so that, because he's not here anymore,
Yeah.
but having the opportunity to be with him and walk with him and learn from him, so that he knew that when he wasn't here, someone else was going to keep it going. And, my adopted nephew, yes, he's not Miccosukee, he's Lakota, but, he's been helping me, especially when I broke my knee a couple years ago.
E.
So, trying to pick up that slack of helping with the prayer walks and walking those walks, and I can help guide it. But, trying to, because somebody has to do it. Someone
Yeah.
has to come along, and you can't force someone. They have to be at that point where you recognize that that desire is there, or Creator sends them to you to pick up that torch.
And what would you say? Like, what's something about an alligator that we should know that is super cool?
I mean, I think people are afraid of them, but
Yeah.
they're just like any other animal. Yes, they can hurt you, but they have feelings. Yeah, to me, because I'm around
Ooh.
them so a lot, I see, especially when that mama gator is there with her little babies, and you see the babies trying to play with her and like nip at her, and then she just moves her snout and just moves them off to the side. It's just like any mom, right? That is
Yeah.
like, and being playful with her kids.
Yeah.
People, you have to be around them enough that to me, they get comfortable with you and they're not paying attention to you. You're there and you can catch those glimpses of how they're just like us. They're trying to raise their kids. They're trying to survive. And to me, their eyes are so expressive. But, a lot of people don't realize that they can hold their breath underwater for like 6 hours or more,
What?
and they don't have to eat every day. They can go, you know, many days without food. And a lot of people don't realize they hibernate like bears hibernate. An
Really?
alligator
Like in the swamp? Or
in the swamp, because they have what they
yeah.
call gator holes, and sometimes they'll like burrow in and dig out an area like under the
Oh.
surface. And if water gets too low, they'll actually go in their caves and stay there and
Oh.
until the rains fill up the Everglades again and they come out, or and in areas where there's ice. I don't know. Yeah, sometimes if you Google it, you can see the images where an alligator, if a lake freezes over, they'll have their snout and the ice is around their snout. All you see is the nostrils, see their nostrils. And
Wow. That's so
Yeah, and they'll
cool.
slow down their metabolism and
Yeah.
they'll just hibernate in that ice. And they always say, don't break the ice around, where an alligator is, you let it be. So a lot of people don't
Yeah.
realize alligators, they hibernate.
I didn't know that. Oh, wow. Those are cool things. I'm so glad I asked. All right. Is there anything else you want to add to that? This has been such an honor to talk with you. I'm just so happy you were able to do this. Thank you.
Well, we're continue to do weekly prayer vigils. The
Okay.
prayer vigils, I started the first one. I invited anyone of whatever faith, whether it's a spirituality or an organized religion, or just anyone to come and pray. And then after that, faith leaders from different churches had reached out to me that, you know what, we made a commitment that we're going to help you do this. And so every Sunday from 5 to 6, right across from the entrance road, we have a prayer vigil, and the different congregations,
Okay.
they have weekly calls to see, who's going to what congregation is going to step forward to lead those prayers. And I usually open for them, and then they take over from there. So that's been really helpful, that these churches have also picked up the call and realized they need to do their part.
Yeah.
Because to me, there's a spiritual war going on here in the United States and around the world, if you really look at it.
Yeah.
But more so recently, because we're in the United States, you see it. To me, it's a spiritual war, and we need to bring people back to our humanity. So it's good to see that these faith leaders have all across the state of Florida have taken that up. And it doesn't happen just in the Everglades. When we're there at 5 p.m., Sarasota, Tallahassee, more cities in Florida are at the same time we are praying. We're collectively praying together.
Oh,
And
nice.
this last weekend, even in Georgia. So it's spreading to other states. When we're out there at 5 o'clock, somewhere else in the United States, there's another group of people praying at the same time.
Great.
It's kind of like indigenous people when we reach out to other tribes and we do, we go into ceremony all together, praying together. It's a very powerful thing. So that's going on every Sunday.
Okay. So that's something that people can connect to, and they can be
Yeah,
part
and
of
through my
that.
Facebook. Yeah, I usually live stream for them.
Oh,
I'll
you
open it
do?
up and then
Okay.
I'll live stream through my personal Facebook
Yeah.
for them. And then the worker circle is it was I think it's a Jewish organization, started many years ago. They've been helping coordinate, so they also live stream
Worker
through their
circle.
Facebook. The workers circle.
The workers circle. Okay.
Yeah.
That's really great. Yeah. So, because I think people will want to intersect with what's going on.
Yeah, and it's gone internationally. So we're trying to keep that attention. The international news covers it more than the United States does.
Yeah. Yeah. For real. Yeah. Well, what Gunawaradu, greetings, love, and respect to you for all the work that you've done and that you carry. And we're sending that energy toward you to keep you strong and happy and healthy. And Nyawa, thanks for talking with us today. And you've just, like I said, I was feeling that energy all the way through. I was like, yee. So you're sending it this way, so we want to send it back to you. So Nyawa.
So thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak with you today.